This is 7 News High School Red Zone Review Preview.
Welcome aboard, everybody, as we roll into week number 5 in the high school red zone. Excited for what's going to be a reasonably warm night, but we should have some great action around the area. Coming off of week number 4, some teams continue to establish themselves as those to beat. And region play is about to get underway, so why not be playing your best football at this point in the season? Well, as some non-region action wrapped up for the Hannah Yellow Jackets, they were going at it against the Wren Hurricanes last Friday in Anderson, trying to make it a 6th straight win against Wren after the Hurricanes had won 6 in a row in the series. Just over 5 minutes ago, opening half, Jacob Owings and Carson Bryan on a 33-yarder. Wren led 13-7. About $1.50 remaining in the first half. Coming right at you, Maury Nance. He would be a big story in this game. That's a 21-yarder, and Hannah was up 14-13 at the break. Mid-fourth quarter, Will Mayfield and Walker Kelly, and Hannah goes up 34-20. Back comes Bryan off the direct snap. It was a 34-27 Hannah lead, but with 1:20 to play in regulation, Nance across the goal line, a 2-yard touchdown. It was his 4th of the night. And Hannah indeed makes it 6 straight wins in the series against their Anderson County neighbor with that 40-27 win.
I'm really pleased with Amari and our offensive line. They stepped it up here in the second half, for probably mid-second quarter on. But it was just a battle of 2 hard-fought teams. Wren always plays us tough. They got a good program, and extremely proud of how our kids finished.
So Hannah, after an opening loss against Burns, getting a 2nd straight win. They had an open date in there. They're 2-1. They've got a huge Region 1-5A opener upcoming against the Greenwood Eagles. More on that game coming up in the show. And why don't we take a look at the Eagles now and what they did last Friday. They were taking on Lexington, making the trek up from the Midlands. This turned out to be a tight ball game. Eagles were trying to make it 9-10. 9 wins out of 10 since 1986 in the series. Trey Crawford with the TD in a back-and-forth battle. Later, Tristan Lewis trying to get himself to pay dirt. In the end, Greenwood rallying for the victory as Lewis and the Eagles going on to the 36-30 triumph. They're a top 5 team in 5A. They are 3-0, getting ready to visit Hannah coming up Friday in the high school red zone. Burns Rebels had an off date 2 weeks ago to think about a previous close loss against Irmo. They then made the short trek over to Dooley Field at Greer and renewed their rivalry against the Greer Yellow Jackets. And pretty much all Burns as it has been in the series. They had won 16 of the past 17. You saw Kane Rogers and Kayla McDowell on that touchdown to extend the lead to 35-9 in the third. And then Emerson James stepping up with a pick of Dawson Fowler. That led to a Jacoby Fuller touchdown. And the Burns Rebels win again in their series against Greer. That's 17 out of 18. 49-9 was the final last Friday.
You hope the close loss would motivate us, and it did. The guys responded very positively. They really locked in and came back and really put a great week together.
Didn't have all that much to say afterward, but he's happy as Burns is now 2-1 as they're setting up for Region 2-5A with an eye on using all that great skill they have to make a run at another region championship. Well, the Westside Rams may be the reigning 4A state runner-up, but they had been outscored in their first 2 games 98-27. They were looking for their first win against the #1 team in 3A, the BHP Bears. Early third quarter with the Bears up by a couple of scores. Noah Thomas and Jaden Glillen get together, and that was a 46-yard completion. It set up MJ Earl's touchdown to extend the lead for BHP. Then, Belton Honeypath, they can not only take it to you, they can play some defense. KJ Miles on the stop, and Belton Honeypath, which lost decisively 55-14 at Westside in 2024, used crazy plays like that safety on their way to a 42-6 win. They're 4th in the past 5 matchups against the Rams.
I'm just so proud for our kids, our senior class, and I thought our kids did a great job. And so proud of our coaches, our 23 seniors. We're all going to be as good as they are, and heck, we're pretty daggum good tonight. How about them Bears?
And there you go. Russell Blackston hyping his ball club. He's got a good one. A lot of talent on both sides of the ball once again for a 4-0 BHP team. So they were #1 in 3A again this week in the SC Prep Football Media Poll. Abbeville #1 again in this week's poll in 1A, and the Panthers taking on a 96 team. They had beaten 12 straight times going into last Friday. And Madarius Burton on the sprint to the end zone for the early score against the Wildcats. who came into the game at 1-2. Abbeville 2-1 on the season at the start of the night. Darius Riley, another playmaker this year for Jamie Nichols' team. And on a night when Nichols was enshrined in the inaugural Hall of Fame class at the school, well, his team gives him a 42-7 win. Panthers 3-1, and they continue to get it done on both sides of the ball. We call it the Amy Wood Bowl around here as Woodruff went to Woodmont last Friday night. Homestanding Wildcats of Woodmont in the blue, trying to knock off an unbeaten Woodruff team. Josh McClure to Frank Lewis, not the Frank Lewis who used to play for the Steelers and the Bills back in the 70s, this Frank Lewis. 50-yard touchdown, but Woodruff's lead was a big one at that stage in the third quarter. Then Connor Davis for the Wolverines to Ryland Renfro on a 53-yard connection. Woodruff riding that on to another victory and a third straight against Woodmont, 48-6. Seneca's a team that, well, they may well end up competing for a state championship in 4A. They were looking to get to 4-0 on the season and trying to make it 35 wins in 36 games going back to 1980 against their neighbor Walhalla. That was Amari Verner, a big part of the story, getting in the end zone. Gavin Toma to Elias McGee on a 44-yarder. Seneca had a 13-0 lead, and they win again against Walhalla and get to 4-0. Razorbacks have yet to get a victory here in 2025. Clinton Red Devils trying to get back to 500. The reigning 2A champs, who are still way up there in the prep football media rankings, going at it against the Chapman team they have not lost to in 6 previous meetings. Panthers in the fourth quarter get the Bryson Cothran to Keelan Tucker connection for the touchdown, and they pull within 7 at 28-21 Clinton. But later on in the fourth, Owen Glenn to PJ McGowan. That gives Clinton a 13-point lead. In overtime, the Red Devils prevail 40-34. They get the victory over Chapman to improve to 2-2. Panthers remain winless at 0-4. Just some of the action we had for you last Friday in the high school red zone. Got some more of that to come, but first, let's have a round table. Todd Summers, Mariah Ross join me to talk about various topics, starting out with Hannah and Greenwood ahead of their big showdown coming up Friday night.
So we roll into region play for some of the area schools. A lot of schools were off last week. Among those getting back in action will be Spartanburg and Dorman in that region and several others. Well, let's start out, though, a huge region opener in Region 1-5A. Hannah is home against Greenwood. Well, Todd Summers, you have seen those two teams play in the last 2 weeks respectively. Give me your take on that matchup.
I saw Hannah play last week against Wren. The Yellow Jackets got the victory 40-27. I was impressed with Amari Nance. He had just over 100 yards rushing, scored 4 rushing touchdowns in that game. However, he also had a pass that if he had caught it would have gone for about a 75, 80-yard touchdown as well. But Hannah runs the football. Last week their quarterback left the game on a stretcher. Don't know his status for this coming week, so we'll have to figure out that situation. As for Greenwood, that's the best football team I've seen so far this year. Quarterback Tristan Lewis kind of runs the show. He's the guy that's going to South Carolina to play in the secondary, but he plays quarterback for the Eagles. He's got 2 big-time wide receivers in Jay Duncan and Desiree Christian, and both those guys are big-time playmakers. So that Greenwood team is pretty talented. Completely different styles between Greenwood and Hannah, as the Eagles like to sling it around and the Yellow Jackets like to ground and pound.
So, Todd, this week you're going to cover the Clinton-Daniel game. Mariah, last week, one of the games you saw involved the Clinton Red Devils. They're a team that's number 2 in their classification in the SC Prep Football Media Poll this week, but they haven't necessarily looked like they had in recent years. But some thoughts on the Red Devils.
Yeah, Pete, you're right. Not looking the same as they did, especially last season. They're missing their quarterback, Sean Richardson, who was such a big part of that rushing attack that they love there at Clinton. That's not to say they don't have players. Javen Cook leads this team with over 100 rushing yards per game, and they have a big O-line with Trey Aiken. He is committed to NC State and is a big part of their rushing attack there. But as you said, they do not look like the team that won a 2A state championship a year ago. As far as their game with Chapman, some self-inflicted wounds. They had a lot of unnecessary penalties. That's definitely something they'll want to clean up as they head into the game against Stanley.
And in the interest of self-disclosure, in a recent show or two in the high school red zone, I referred to Javen Cook as Speedy. His nickname is Zoom because he zooms right along. Right. Todd, you've been out to Clinton practice this week getting ready for that game. You probably saw his speed up close, but what do you think about that matchup against the Lions, who've really been in control of that series of late?
Well, first of all, what stands out about Zoom is the fact that he's 5'6" and 150 pounds. You see him stand next to Trey Aiken, and you're like, wow, that's impressive. But Clinton is a good football team, but Coach Fountain wanted to stop shy of saying they're a great football team like last year's squad was. They certainly have a ways to go for them. But this Daniel squad, new head coach, new starting quarterback, same old Daniel. Yep. They just don't make mistakes. They are very efficient in what they do. And Jace Gross comes in from Pendleton. That's where he was a starting quarterback last year as a freshman. But when I was out there talking with him earlier this week, I learned that he was in Daniel's feeder system in 7th and 8th grade. So he's been a part of the Lions feeder system. He knows his teammates already. And then they got a wide receiver named Trey Wembley, who was a freshman making some plays for the Lions last year, catching passes from a different quarterback. But interestingly, Trey has a connection with Jace in that they're both from the state of Alabama, and they knew each other when they were in Alabama, and now they're together again at Daniel.
And a school that's produced over the years, the late Terry Smith, who played in the NFL, and Nuke Hopkins, who's still in the league, and maybe Trey Wembley, a young guy, but a great future for him, and there have been some other really good ones. Mariah, you're going to cover the Battle of the Golden Strip this week. Hillcrest and Malden, just down the road from each other. It'll be a great crowd, but Hillcrest has really controlled this series lately.
Yeah, the Hillcrest Rams have taken the win in this one since 2016. So Malden really looking to show out and show what they're capable of. This season already tied their win record from a year ago. So off to a strong start. I guarantee getting this win will absolutely help them propel on in the season if that is what happens.
All right. Well, coming up in the review preview, we're going to look back at more action from last Friday, including the Chesney Eagles. Pretty interesting ball club. They put together a nice start to their season. We'll look at their action and more when we come back on the review preview. Well, Emerald and Broome got together at the home of the Centurions. Vikings making the trek up to take on Broome in Spartanburg, and they were looking to pull away in the fourth quarter. Bo Height to Rykevius Logan on the touchdown. That made it a 34-12 lead for an Emerald team trying to get back in the win column after falling to another Spartanburg County school, Woodruff, the week before. Christine weaving his way for the end zone. Emerald, a team to keep an eye on. They go on to the victory and get to 3-1 on the season, 41-18. Broome Falls to 1-3. Welcome back into our high school red zone review preview. We're getting ready for week 5 as we look back to week number 4. Well, the Chesney Eagles are a ball club that, well, save for a competitive loss a couple of weeks ago. They have been a pretty tough machine behind guys like Evan Reese-Lauder and Marquez Franklin. That was a punt return for a touchdown. They were able to hold off RS Central back and forth battles. They win a battle of the state line 28-21. They are now 3-1 on the season. Matchup of Anderson County foes, Powdersville and Pendleton meeting at Cunningham Stadium, the home of the Bulldogs last Friday, and Damari Andrews coming up with a pick of Dax Allen. That was one of multiple interceptions by the defense. Stephen Hudgens later had one for the Patriots. They used those, the pick 6 by Andrews went for 70 yards. The Hudgens interception set up a Kagan Reed TV, and Powdersville is off to a 3-1 start. They've won 5 in a row against Pendleton, 35-7. Fountain Inn looking to get back in the win column after they suffered a difficult loss the week before when they gave up a 10-point lead against Malden at the half. Well, C.J. Thomas Anderson and crew were off to the races early and often. That was an 80-yard touchdown. Little flip by Sam Holliday on the jet sweep to Ben Rowe for a 14-0 lead. The Fury, maybe they were furious, and that's why they were able to roll on to the win. Thomas Anderson again with a score, leading to another Holiday score, rather, and Fountain Inn. They get a 3rd win in 4 all-time meetings against Carolina. They're 2-2 with the 62-0 victory. Trojans fall to 1-2. Palmetto and Liberty at the home of the Red Devils. Red Devils trying to make it 3 straight wins. Palmetto outscored 98-6 over their first 3 games during an 0-3 start going in. But this strike by Ace Luther to Zion Robinson for the Mustangs. Back come the Red Devils. Jamaji Kareem. This is a 20-yarder for a first down. Hunter Ferguson later comes up with some defense for Palmetto, but in the end, Liberty coming away with a 42-19 win. They improved to 3-1 on the season. Meanwhile, St. Joe's looking to bounce back from a loss against MVP the week before, and they would count on a warrior. His name is Rambo. That would be Mac Rambo, a guy who was among the top 75 in the nation in rushing yards going into last Friday. Better than 500 on the year. You saw a 20-yard touchdown, then a 15-yarder to make it 14-0. Later on, Jack Stewart, little trick play as he got it to Sam Patterson. He then uses the wide receiver option throw and tosses it downfield to Paul Norman on a 40-yard score. Pickens, Miles, Perrick coming back with a 45-yard touchdown. This was a shootout. St. Joe's, though, prevailing and getting the victory 49-41, their second in as many meetings. Pickens had put 70 on Walhalla recently. Well, 41 wasn't enough as they fell by 8. Landrum trying to get to 3-1 on the season. Originally was supposed to play Polk County, one of their rivals, last Friday, but a scheduling conflict led them to have a game with Asheville Christian, and, well, it wasn't much of one. 3rd quarter already up big. Dallas Collins with the interception. Braylon Revis doing a nice job out of the backfield for Mike Reed's team, and the Cardinals were knocking on the door again. Revis does the honors to make it 56-0 in the 3rd. And in a first ever meeting against Asheville Christian, Landrum cruising 63-13. What about Mountain View Prep? The aforementioned Stars were trying to improve to 4-0. They rolled down Highway 81 to Southern Anderson County, taking on Kevin Hatton and the Crescent Tigers. He's going to go 20 yards for a 7-0 lead for the home team. Mark Anderson with a 48-yard run gets down to the Tigers' 1-yard line, gets out of the backfield. Miami Dolphin look on the uniform, breaks some tackles, eventually leads to a quarterback keep for the touchdown. And MVP riding that on to a win. They, by the way, have had a schedule change for this week. They'll be back in Anderson County taking on the Anderson Cavaliers on the road in the high school red zone Friday night. They originally were going to play a game in North Carolina Saturday, but MVP will be playing at the Anderson Cavaliers on Friday. Western North Carolina Chase Trojans looking for a 2nd win on the year, trying to get to 2-1. First meeting against Madison since 2019, and Garrett McInnes with a 30-yard field goal. Trojans have the early 3-zip advantage. Later on, Darren Tipton connecting with Terrell Johnson. You're playing quarterback for Jim Sosby. You're going to throw it around a lot. That was part of a Chase victory as they pulled on past Madison 30-15 was the final score in that ball game. So that's a look back at week number 4 in the high school red zone. We noted earlier that there really weren't that many games played. Nearly 20 teams were off because several of them getting ready for region play, and they wanted to strategically put the open date ahead of that. As we get set for week number 5, we talked about the Greenwood-Hanna showdown to open up play in Region 1-5A. We still have plenty of non-region games at hand, including the Daniel Lions heading back to Clinton, this time to take on the Clinton Red Devils. And, well, the Lions had themselves a fine quarterback a year ago, Grayson Clary, but he moved on early to Rabun Gap over in Georgia. They got a new QB this year who's a sophomore, and he's got a favorite target who's also a sophomore. And Todd Summers with the story of that sophomore combo for Daniel.
After being a part of the Lions feeder program in middle school, Jace Gross started as a freshman at Pendleton last season. This season, starting for Daniel, he's averaging nearly 300 yards passing a game with 8 touchdowns and 0 interceptions through 3 contests, finding success playing alongside some familiar faces.
I knew the guy since 6th grade, so it didn't take me too long, but it kind of took me a little bit to get the respect of guys because I kind of left and then I came back.
However, Gross's connection to his top wideout, fellow sophomore Trey Wembley, goes back even further to a time when both were living in another state.
He moved in from Alabama here, and I'm from Alabama too, so we already knew each other since like 6th grade. So that was really good. And like when he moved here and I moved away, and it was kind of a bummer because we wanted to play together.
Before I actually moved here, me and him actually met up in Alabama, and my dad met, and we threw a little bit, and then we kind of just kept that connection ever since.
Despite being part of the 2028 recruiting class, both Gross and Wembley each already have double-digit Division I offers.
I don't try to get my head wrapped up in it too much because I know it doesn't mean anything. I'm early, I'm young. I don't try and get too caught up in it. It tells me I'm doing something right for sure, but I still have more work to do.
I kind of just lean on my parents, and they tell me not to just worry about that too much and just bloom where I'm planted.
You know, I've heard that quote, bloom where you're planted, around Clemson before, said by a football coach at the local college there. Anyway, nice story there. See how that matchup plays out. Coming up on this program, we've got the plays of the week here in the High School Red Zone Review Preview. And welcome back into the show as we roll into week number 5. Excited for that Hannah and Greenwood game. That could be a phenomenal battle, although it would be hard pressed to surpass the excitement that we saw a couple of weeks ago back in week number 3 when Greenwood and Dorman went toe to toe, and eventually the Eagles with a late touchdown in regulation forced overtime and won in OT against the Cavaliers. But could be just as impressive. And you know what? Greenwood on the road, boy, they can get another road victory. That would be equally impressive too. That's one of the games we'll keep an eye on, but so much more when we see you in the high school red zone. Let's look back on week number 4 one final time with our plays of the week. Play number 5, Kane Rogers and Burns were looking for another win against the Greer Yellow Jackets, and Kalen McDowell with a pretty diving catch on that touchdown, laying out for the ball. He sensed a score, and he went out and got the football to achieve it for play number 5. Hannah in that battle against Wren, boy, Amari Nance, 4-touchdown night. He was phenomenal, powers through the tackle, picks up the first down and a lot more. He takes it down to the 2-yard line. That was a 35-yard gain, helping the Jackets on their way to the 13-point win. Amari Nance, one of the many in that backfield stable once more for Jason Tone and Hannah. He gets play number 4. Play number 3, Hendersonville lost by a point at home against Irwin. Check out Gianni Thompson. Boy, you want to be able to tackle in the open field. He read that little dump-off slip screen perfectly. Thompson the tackle for play number 3. Westside had issues aplenty in their loss at BHP, including, well, an unconventional-looking safety, and the punter got it right. Now, the BHP players wanted touchdown, but the punter for Westside said nope, hit the crossbar, essentially meaning it would have been snapped out of bounds. That's a safety, so Westside gave up 2 instead of 6 right there for play number 2. And play number 1, Eastside went up the line in Greenville County, knocked off Blue Ridge, and Peyton Schrader and Caden Workman had themselves pretty good nights, including this play. He pops up and comes right back down to a guy wearing number 7, Workman. Number 7s always get preferential treatment around here. In this case, it's Workman, a working man's touchdown as he makes the catch off the mini pop fly and heads on. Again, coming up on Channel 7 at 11 o'clock on Friday, High School Red Zone, then a full half hour on the CW62 at 11:35. We will see you then, but that'll do it for this edition of the Review Preview. And for now, Pete Yanity saying thanks for joining us and so long.